All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, depending on what part of the world you are joining us from. My name is Alex Faust, your host of Conversations at the Edge. And as you can see, I am here live with our special guest, Mason Harris, today. If you're not familiar with Mason, he is a listener, speaker, author, world-class entrepreneur, and knows quite a few things about selling. Growing up, he was fascinated by people, both introverted and extroverted, whose actions, perseverance, and risk-taking led to more successful lives. These behaviors and others he's identified are the characteristics and foundations of Chutzpah, a term which he will explain a little bit more if you're not familiar with, and he's now written a book about called The Chutzpah Advantage, where he teaches leaders like us the skill sets for going bigger, being bolder, and doing better. So I'm thrilled to be joined here live for the first time since we've been doing Conversations at the Edge. We're here in Dallas, Texas for Vern's Scaling Up Summit and joined in person by Mason. So welcome, Mason. How are you today?
It is a pleasure to be here. It's a little unusual getting accustomed to looking at the camera instead of turning towards you to speak. It's kind of my first wife used to say, "Don't look at me, just talk that way." So I kind of feel like I'm back in that mode.
Awesome. Well, as always, for the folks who are here live, if you have questions, please send them in through the chat or the Q&A. The last 10 minutes are for you, so we will get to your questions. But Mason, I think what we're all wondering is, what is chutzpah?
It is a great question, and you are pronouncing it correctly. I'll start with that. But let me ask you, you're from the Philly area. You've probably grown up and seen a lot of chutzpah or hutzpah growing up. How would you define it?
I would define chutzpah as like gumption, as like willing to kind of just take life by the horns and going after it. You got cojones, as they would say in Spanish. So yeah, I think that's how I explain it.
You've hit on a number of the definitions or synonyms that I heard when I was researching and interviewing people for this book. The gumption, very positive term. The cojones implies strength. Occasionally I would also hear rude and demanding. And it's an interesting thing because the word means all of that. People who have a negative perception of what chutzpah might be are not incorrect, and people have a positive perception as to the strength and ability to help us move forward more quickly have the right perception as well. For me, I'll start with this. Chutzpah is a skill set. It's not a single word. It's not just grit or determination on its own, and it's not demanding. It is a set of skills, in my model, 8 key behaviors and characteristics that when combined create a skill set. And as with all skill sets, it can be misused. So for example, Alex, you and I can learn to be computer pros and write code. After graduating with our skill set of computer coding, you decide to create business applications and software that help people become more productive, help companies operate more efficiently. I might choose to use that same skill set and write ransomware. Well, the skill set is the same. How we implement it, constructive or destructive, is really a function of our own ethics, upbringing, and morality. So it's the same with chutzpah. But you're right, chutzpah is about persevering to accomplish objectives, overcoming obstacles, getting started even, which so many of us don't do.
Great. Well, I'm curious, like, I think some people are probably born with chutzpah, that's their personality. Is it something also that you can be taught and you can kind of learn and grow into as you grow into a leader?
I believe research shows that there are elements of our personality that we are born with, but more important than that is what we learn and practice moving forward. So there may be people who are more communicative, more likely to be risk takers, to climb to the highest bar in the gym when they're 4 years old and their parents are going, "What are you doing?" And others who sit back because they're more fearful. Yes, that does exist. But as far as the person who's fearful, learning to overcome fears and climb further, take risks, understand that failure is part of what we do because we've chosen a lifestyle as business people that requires decisions, and not every decision is going to be correct. So yes, it can be learned, and more importantly, it can be taught and become part of our company's DNA, part of our company's culture.
So can you talk a little bit more about what does that look like when chutzpah is part of the company DNA?
Well, a couple of things. For example, sometimes we think of the decision makers within an organization. Well, decision makers suffer the same way we do when it comes to making a difficult decision. Whether or not to cross the street when the light is red and their car is coming, or wait for the green light, is simple. We know what's safe, we know what to do. But what about when it comes to funding an area of growth in a company that leans one way versus another? Or through this pandemic, we've seen numerous companies having to pivot dramatically from their original business just to survive. Those decisions, one can never be certain about when we do it. But if there's enough discussion and enough input from team members, because there is a culture of you will not be criticized for saying something we disagree with. You will not be criticized for doing something that may end up not being correct. We expect and understand that we're going to learn from mistakes. We just want to make sure we minimize those mistakes. We minimize the ambiguity about all the decisions that we're making.
And so does chutzpah always kind of start from the top, or is it something that, you can have individuals at different levels of the organization kind of creating a culture of that fearlessness, the willingness to take risks and make mistakes?
It's a good question. Without a doubt, the people who are paying attention to this event right now, live and when it's recorded, you all have chutzpah. You are on the pages of my book, actually, because you're an entrepreneur. You see an opportunity, you go after it. You know that not every decision you make will be correct. You learn how to handle objections, because let's face it, life is filled with objections from work colleagues, from bankers or sources of finance, from our kids. If they're not objecting, we're wondering what's wrong with them today, what happened. So these elements of chutzpah that you have, all your employees have at some level as well. It's interesting. People who are shyer versus more outgoing. I've had somebody say that, I'm shy, I really don't have chutzpah. And yet, if we look at research related to leadership, a lot of the most successful leaders don't identify themselves as being extroverts. They actually identify as introverts, or maybe in between, ambiverts, but they're definitely not extroverts, but they know how to rise to the occasion. Well, all of our employees know how to rise to the occasion when necessary. Maybe a work occasion, maybe a personal occasion, but it's there. Frequently, what's missing is a feeling of safety, that they can say what they need to say without being reprimanded or other people basically making fun of them in a way.
Do you ever find that, creating the space for chutzpah to be part of the organizational culture can go too far? Are there mistakes that you've seen when leaders are, using chutzpah to make decisions and lead their companies?
I'll tell you a quick story about two companies in New York City. One was founded by a person whose limited opportunities by way of education, by where in New York City he lived, didn't offer a lot of opportunity, a lot of job potential. But he started working at 13. He was hardworking. By the time he was 19, 20 years old, he was clearing $2 million a year. Unfortunately, he was a drug dealer. Now, let me contrast that with somebody else who decided he wanted to go into the healthcare business because he was successful at teaching people how to improve the quality of their health, exercise differently, see results, obtain the discipline. Well, the health club industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry. You're competing against companies that have resources beyond your imagination. And entrepreneurs in this side rarely succeed unless if there's a lot of backing. Well, this person succeeded. And I thought to myself when I heard the story, I would definitely love to have coffee with the guy who built the business and opened up a gym and is thriving. with that gym, has clientele who are loyal and referring others to him. The guy who started the drug business, I'm not quite so sure that I'd be as comfortable. The really interesting thing, it's the same guy. So the skill set that enabled this drug dealer to succeed in, you talk about deadly competition, that's deadly competition at a much different level than we have. You talk about building a distribution network, marketing, reaching people, differentiating yourself from the other dealers. This person did it. He had chutzpah. He also went to jail. While in jail, he changed his thought process. He had a son right before going into jail. And he said, I'm going to get out of here. And by the way, he was about 60, 70 pounds overweight. He said, I'm gonna lose this weight and I'm gonna be a good father to him and change my life. Well, he lost the weight by creating an exercise plan for himself. He lost the weight in his cell. Pretty soon in the jail yard, people were saying, hey, can you work with me? You look terrific. Can you teach me to do that? When he got out, he thought, well, this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna open a gym. But sources of funding were not available to him. It was hard to get a job even as a convict, as an ex-convict. So he started by teaching people in the park. From the park, he got enough clientele. He also found a group that works with ex-convicts to help them get into business, helps them get jobs. Well, let's put it this way. In his business, he only hires other ex-convicts because he knows how difficult it is for them to find jobs. So not surprisingly, he's using what he learned to help others. But the same chutzpah that helped him the first portion of his life, helped him become a successful business person as well. And that's chutzpah. So can it be misused? Yes, it can also go the other way. We know Bernie Madoff, the story of stealing, embezzling, I think it was close to $65 billion was the final number. I'll have to check that. But when he first started his company, there was no intention to steal. He was a hardworking guy and he created a technological advantage in his company that gave him quotes more quickly than other brokers were getting them. And he was dealing with small stocks. That's how he made his money. 20, 30 years in, there was a change on the stock exchange that made it so that he couldn't sell in fractions. This stock is 5 versus 5.25 versus 5.5. They sold in decimals. So between 5 and 5.25, he had a big spread. That was his margin. They changed it. Now they were selling it at 5.125 cents, $5.12.5 per share. Instead of pivoting and using his knowledge and his base of clients to grow in a different direction, he changed his model, and the rest is, I guess, unfortunate history in the financial world. So to answer your question, yes, it can be misused.
Thank you for that. I'm curious, like, what are the other attributes that leaders need to make chutzpah rather a positive versus the negative? So when we look at those two stories, what are the other things that led the one entrepreneur and Bernie Madoff to have a positive factor versus a negative?
Well, it's interesting. Jim Collins wrote an article related to level 5 leadership and humility and extreme persistence, in essence. Now, most people don't associate humility with chutzpah, but here was the connection made by one of the most respected business leaders, trainers, authors, teachers of our time, saying that humility is kind of that unexpected presence. We sometimes think, oh, this company is failing. We need to replace this CEO and get in somebody who's a hard driver, who will get in your face, who will push you. We're not worried about niceties or manners now. And yet the research shows you can be a nice guy and be tough. You can make things happen and earn the respect of your teammates, of your colleagues, so that everybody's more aligned and working towards a common goal.
Thank you. So are there different kinds of chutzpah?
Well, it's interesting. Obviously, there's what we would call good chutzpah and bad chutzpah. I tend to think of it in different categories. So there is win-win chutzpah, which is what we do. You have an idea, you seize an opportunity, you create a company. The idea is that you will win, Your clients will win, your customer base will win, your stakeholders will win. Everybody comes up ahead. A rising tide lifts all boats because of what you've accomplished. There is self-serving chutzpah, which is this is about me. I don't care how I reach my goals or how many bodies I have to step over, I'm going to do that. So that gets into the very destructive type of chutzpah that we spoke about. There is also what I call political chutzpah, which doesn't really apply to this audience, but it's the type of chutzpah where I can say one thing to you, one thing to somebody else the next day that's completely different, with a smile on my face and not feel any regret about lying to somebody. And unfortunately, I think that permeates too much of politics nowadays. We have what I call oy vey chutzpah, which is an expression which is oy vey. It's kind of like, I can't believe what that person did. Nobody gets hurt, but the foundation of the story is that was very gutsy, not necessarily honest, but again, nobody gets hurt. That's the critical element of it. There's also what I call other serving chutzpah. If some of our listeners today are nonprofits or have created philanthropic organizations, theirs is about serving others. They still need the chutzpah skills because they still need to get started. They still need to handle objections when asking donors for funds. They still need to understand why donors actually will contribute. And that gets into understanding need, pain, and opportunity. And they're frequently trailblazers in what they do. And without a doubt, they have a purpose. That's why they're serving others through their organization.
So I'm curious, what would be the difference between the win-win chutzpah and the serving others chutzpah, the first one and the last one?
You mean the win-win and the other serving?
Yes.
Okay, win-win, I write a book, I speak, I hope to make money off of that so I can raise my family and keep us off of the unemployment rolls. But basically, you win and I win. In self-serving chutzpah, a good example I use in the book is Mother Teresa. Contrary to popular belief, she wasn't in it for the money. Matter of fact, there was no money for Mother Teresa. If anything, she had to struggle against the very patriarchal hierarchy that did not want to give her quite the funding she needed initially. They gave her a little money to try and accomplish something in terms of her objectives of serving poor, ill, homeless. A lot of the growth came about because of her success and because she reached out beyond the church to raise funds. And again, for her, it wasn't about, when we hit a certain milestone, I'm going to get a nicer car. I'm going to move into a nicer house. That's what I mean by other serving chutzpah. Now, you don't have to be Mother Teresa. You work in a nonprofit in an organization that provides benefits to others. You are in that other serving role along with self-serving. There is some overture between the two.
Thank you for sharing. And just a reminder, if you are here live and you do have questions for Mason, feel free to type them into the chat or the Q&A, and we will ask away. So, Mason, I saw on LinkedIn you wrote an article about chutzpah found in Ted Lasso. The idea that we need to appreciate our wins more than we dwell on the rejections. Can you talk about how you encourage leaders to make that a staple in their organization, how that ties into chutzpah?
Sure. It gets back again to reality, which is that not every decision we make is going to be correct. We're going to make errors. When we have a win, there's an old adage. Let me step back a second. There's an old adage: success has 100 fathers and failure is an orphan. So the idea is that, this project was very successful, company's doing well. It's amazing how many people step up and say, I was so involved in that. That really was my baby. But when it fails, it's kind of like, who's responsible for this? And nobody's around. Well, I really had very little to do with it. I may have sat in on a couple of meetings, but I didn't even input. I was on my phone all the time. So when we have successes, it's important for leaders to share that success, to thank those who actually participated, make sure people are aware of their contributions and how that made a difference. We tend to dwell too often on the negative. It's important to understand when a decision goes bad, especially in the medical community. The doctors meet weekly to understand why a patient died, what could have been done to have prevented that. You have to look at the errors because we grow from the errors, we get better, and future patients benefit from our reviews. In the Ted Lasso episode, if I remember correctly, the one that I wrote about, there's a character who really he was on the staff, picking up the towels, taking abuse from the players. He wasn't anybody that was barely even noticed. But Ted Lasso noticed that he had a real good knowledge of European football, what we call soccer here in America. And he understood players and how defense and offense should be set up to respond to what the other team was doing. And Ted Lasso promoted him. In this particular case, he is a shy person. He was making a reservation for his parents for a dinner, and he requested a window view for his parents for their anniversary. And they said, well, we can't guarantee that right now, even though it's 2 weeks ahead. Well, they show up the night of the anniversary dinner and they give him a table all the way in the back, right by the restroom doors, even though the table by the window is open. And he'd been coached during the week on what he could say, what he could do to change his fortune, to step up, to self-advocate, which is what Chutzpah is about. He went back to the person at the front and said, look, I had asked 2 weeks ago when we made the reservation if we can move to the front. Can you please accommodate us? She looks at him and she remembered him and she said, sure, let's move you. That self-advocacy got that done. It also gave him the courage to then ask her for a phone number, which he completely rejected. But that's fine, because a rejection, especially following a win, is easy to accept because we need to focus on that win.
Thank you for that. So I'm also curious how Chutzpah can help you in sales and marketing. You talked about overcoming objections. What are some of the biggest lessons and benefits that you've seen from people utilizing Chutzpah in the sales and marketing realm?
Well, when people think of Chutzpah, they frequently think of, oh, salespeople have Chutzpah. Marketing people have Chutzpah. Salespeople, because they go out there on a regular, everyday basis, and they try and obtain commitment from a new customer as to a service or a product. And rejections are very frequent. And salespeople learn to live with the rejections. They might try harder. They're trained specifically to overcome objections, to make sure they understand the objection. But more often than they would like, they walk away without the sale. Marketing people create a story. Some people respond well to the story. Some kind of feel that this is no different than anybody else's. I'm not emotionally attached. To both be a storyteller and create marketing campaigns, and to be a salesperson, knowing that you are going to fail more often than you want, requires chutzpah. And chutzpah also gives you the ability to persevere. So you know, after you've been told no 8 times today, that tomorrow is another day. And there are new people, some of whom will benefit from your products and services. So you continue forwards. People who don't have this training or this mindset too often give up too easily and change course too easily. Maybe they haven't gotten a job after sending out 6 resumes and they think, oh, that's it for me. I don't know what I'm going to do. I have my daughter as a friend who was sent out over 100 resumes without getting a job. She was trying to move from her first job to her second. And I spoke with my daughter and I knew the friend. I said, well, maybe she should try changing her opening letter, a bit of the resume. Understand as well that these are electronic systems that are rejecting her. It's not people rejecting her, because there is a difference in our mind. You reject me personally, I feel it. I'm rejected by a machine, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. But 100 times is a lot. She could have just said, I'm going to stick with this job that I don't like. I feel I'm going nowhere. But she persisted. And she found a job that paid her 30% more. She moved to a new city, and she's happier with that. It wouldn't have happened without the perseverance, without the overcoming this major obstacle that had been put in her path.
I feel like when we say chutzpah and talk about it, you need to like make a fist and do one of these,
Yes, and actually the fist, and then the way you're getting the word, a lot of people go pronunciation, right? Is it chutzpah? No, it's not a ch like chai, like chai tea. It's not a hard K like character or chaos. It's ch, as if you got a chicken bone caught in your throat. I'm going to talk about chutzpah today. So,
thank you. So I'm curious if there's a ripple effect that stems from chutzpah. How does this characteristic, this way of being, impact the folks around you?
Okay. Let's see. Pat Lencioni, one of our favorite authors and teachers about business as well, used to speak about the dysfunctions of a team. And in particular, when speaking about decision making, the idea that a decision should be left to the one person to make is absurd. And it also shouldn't be a meeting filled with people dominated by three people where the decision is almost like fait accompli. We already know what it's going to be. Rather, there should be chaos in making that decision. People need to challenge each other. They have to make sure, especially for the biggest decisions, the best decisions come when there's a very healthy debate where nobody holds back. That doesn't mean that they stay married to their position when they walk in, but rather that they're truly open. And when posed with the question is, okay, let's imagine that your solution is going to fail and your solution is going to fail. How do we prevent these solutions from failing and see which one actually takes us to our mission, to what we're trying to succeed more quickly or with more probability, a higher probability? So in terms of getting this through an organization, we need to encourage people to advocate for themselves, which is really advocating for the company, to speak up in meetings, to come to us with suggestions. People who are day-to-day contact with their customers, they know things that people at the top don't know. And frequently, they're never asked for their opinion. So we need to encourage that. We need to encourage people to seize the day, to trailblaze, to do unique things, to think of the wildest ideas they possibly can, because even though 9 out of 10 of those ideas are going to be like, that's ridiculous. Did you come into this morning drinking too much cough medicine? That's not going to fly. But 1 out of 10, somebody's going to say, oh, let's not dismiss that one that quickly. I have a situation here. I wonder if this could work out in the right scenario.
Yeah, we have a core value, speak your mind at Growth Institute. Maybe we need to say in parentheses, chutzpah.
That's right.
Yeah. So as we come to the end of our conversation today, I just want to ask you any final thoughts that you'd like to leave the community with?
Sure. We've spoken about you recognize the bad decisions and you grow from them, but you also celebrate the wins. Chutzpah, what I like about it is all of the behaviors and characteristics in the model are within everyone's control. You don't need special training. You don't need to become a computer programmer. You don't need a law degree. You don't need to go to medical school to fill that role. You don't need any of this specialized training to have chutzpah. It's within you to make the changes that benefit you, your family, your colleagues at work, your team, your organization, and in essence, the community around you. We all get better because of the chutzpah that people have had in the past.
Fantastic. Well, Mason, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you to the community. And if you enjoyed today's conversation, Mason is sticking around here because we're about to record his new learning suite with Growth Institute. So there'll be more of the Chutzpah Advantage coming to you very soon. So thanks again for joining us. And thank you for being here with me live for our first in-person conversation.
And thank you, Alex. And it's a pleasure sitting so close together.
Yeah, absolutely. Take care, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Well, thanks so much for paying